When I say regional exclusives, what does your mind wander to? If you're in North America, I'm sure most likely you end up thinking about games from like Japan, which for one reason or another never saw localization, be that due to cost, cultural reasons, different hardware, or maybe even a game just being too darn not safe for work for our wholesome family entertainment boxes. Alternatively, you might think of games from the PAL region, which might have never left Europe due to the video gaming industry being fairly different throughout the 80s and into the 90s. Or games just sometimes not being seen as worth the effort to bring to North America due to unfamiliarity with a series or a character. But I never really hear anyone really talk about games that were only released here in North America. It may be because, well... But even talking to friends overseas, I'd never hear much about what games never made it out from the West. Hey guys, it's Ren with Thunderclub, and today I'm going to be taking a look at 5 of the more interesting examples of these games. And where possible, I'm going to try and come up with some explanation as to why these titles might not have made it out of the region. But before we get started, make sure you get subscribed to stay up to date with the newest stuff. We're on the road to 100 subscribers, and every one of you can help make us reach that goal. Now, let's get started. Now, we're going to be starting off with a pretty interesting case of an extremely popular anime series. A topic that, spoiler alert, is going to be revisited later on in this list. Dragonball GT Transformation was released in North America only on August 9, 2005 for the Game Boy Advance. And it was a beat-em-up covering the first 2 arcs of the Dragonball GT anime. It was developed by Webfoot Technologies, famous for the cult classic Legacy of Goku series, and published by Atari, famous for, well, you know. This game's existence is actually a little bit confusing to me, honestly, which might explain why this game never left North America. This title released months after the original run of Dragon Ball GT had concluded in this region, and on top of it, the Nintendo DS at this point was already 8 months into its run. Dragon Ball GT Transformation shows a lot of evidence of time crunch as well, with information for a decent handful of characters who weren't playable being hidden in the game files, along with promotional material advertising even more characters that never made it into the release. Which kinda leads me to believe that this game was simply running a bit too behind schedule to warrant a wider release, combined with Japan in particular not really being fans with GT as a series to begin with, combined with the fact that the original run over there had concluded all the way back in 1997 at that point. While that hasn't ever really stopped Dragon Ball Z games from coming out en masse, that era of the series is a lot more loved and respected compared to what came after it. So it kinda makes sense that money might not be seen in something like going to the trouble of releasing it elsewhere. As for the game itself, it's pretty much a bog standard beat 'em up. There's really not much to note here other than this game has some pretty rough music that isn't too easy to listen to. I'd honestly only really recommend it to those of you who really want to say you've played every Dragon Ball game or something. Otherwise, it's probably for the best it stayed over here. The Nancy Drew series from HER Interactive is a point-and-click adventure series, and the guilty pleasure of Sliv. It's at its 38th installment at the time of recording, which almost makes it a little crazy to think that if you weren't in North America, you might not even know there are Nancy Drew video games. Based loosely off the books, these games have you solving mysteries. They're not really marvels or anything, but in cases like this, brand name can do a lot to carry a series to infamy. But that's what's a mystery in itself. Why such a huge series never left North America, especially in a world where digital distribution has made international releases easier than ever for PC gaming. You see, from what I can gather, this is a simple case of copyright issues, combined with the developer's own struggles. You see, the Nancy Drew distribution rights are a little bit all over the place outside of North America, with NCSoft of all people currently holding the rights to the series in Russia, apparently, and things seemingly a little bit more up in the air elsewhere. There's also a matter of cost to translate and export something text-heavy like a point-and-click adventure game, where countries like Germany, for example, even changed her name, and the names of other characters as well, and with a rebranding combined with cost of translation, it's possible that the cost simply outweighs what profits can be made. Especially when you take into account that for years the games were released every 6 months, until the company basically bankrupted itself, creating yet another issue that would have impeded international prospects. Next up is a 2-for-1 special, Twisted Metal 3 and 4. And I'm sure some people over here weren't really expecting to see a series like this pop up on the list. Twisted Metal is a long-running series primarily handled by Sony themselves, so why are these two games in a series that were a runaway success never released anywhere else? I mean, who doesn't love a little bit of brutal carnage in their life? Well, according to David Jaffe, a developer mainly known for the Twisted Metal series and God of War back in 2011, it turned out that the Twisted Metal series was apparently not really well understood outside of North America, with the games not being properly marketed internationally leading to its lack of success as a series outside of NTSC. I think especially in Europe, the candy wrapper is so off-putting to certain people. You say, that's so not for us. There's not enough irony, there's not enough humor. It's not given the chance to unveil what's underneath the candy wrapper. The series was also going through some growing pains at the time. The developers 989 Studios were stretched pretty thin across multiple projects during the development of Twisted Metal 3 and 4, and it really showed in the reception both of these games ended up receiving. Both were criticized quite heavily at release and were seen as some of the weakest points in the series' history even to this day. It's possible that the lukewarm response combined with lack of general interest led to these games being stuck here. So, while I don't exactly agree with the idea that Europe just didn't understand the joys of vehicular mayhem, I can kinda see why these games would likely get the axe. Though I'm starting to see a bit of a trend here that might be explaining why these games didn't exactly leave a huge impact elsewhere. But, just in case, let's just keep going before I jump to any conclusions. Oh boy, now let's talk about everyone's favorite punching bag on the GBA, Sonic the Hedgehog. Originally released for the celebration of the Blue Blur's 15th anniversary, this game wasn't released anywhere but North America for a pretty cut and dry reason. Like a certain other celebration of the Blue Blur's 15th anniversary that came out on other consoles, it was nearly bloody unplayable. On paper, it's a shame too, a version of the original with the added ability to save, play it on the go, listen to the in-game music like your GBA is a big, clunky, ugly MP3 player, and now you can use the spin dash? Hey, sign me up! I would have eaten this up at the time. The issue is that this version of the game comes with a slew of problems ranging from downright broken physics, a frame rate that takes a vacation and might or might not send you a postcard if it feels like it, buggered all music, the game playing in a more squished resolution to fit the Game Boy Advance's smaller screen, and to top it off, enemies were invisible if they weren't entirely on the screen, which led to this game being ridiculed and outright unplayable. To add salt to the wound, within months of the game's release, a modder by the name of Stealth had both gone ahead and reported the original game to the Game Boy Advance, but even managed to add more features to it, proving this wasn't a case of the hardware somehow not being up to the job. In fact, later on, Sega would even end up hiring Stealth to handle later releases of the same game just a few years later. As for this version though, I guess it's for the best this one stays both in the West and in the past. Okay, on the final stop of our roundup, we're going to be bringing things back full circle, back to where we started. We're going to be talking about one...
Hello everybody, I, Kazanarius, have infiltrated this list just to talk to you all about Shonen Jump's One Piece. Yep, another weird North America only anime game. So avast me arties, grab your hooks and eye patches, and let's set sail for adventure. Why the fuck did I write that line? One Piece takes place over the period of time the 4Kids dub of One Piece had covered. If you don't know what the 4Kids dub of One Piece is, congratulations, you're normal. Go grab a Little Caesars pizza. But if you do know what it is, well. Between me, however, this 4Kids version of One Piece was awesome, and this game was a pretty good companion to the show. One Piece is a sort of 2D beat-em-up with platforming elements. Each stage has you go through a part of the show and learn different moves, and you also gain different crew members that you can activate to do their special techniques. It's not long, hard, or particularly groundbreaking in the genre, but it's a lot of fun seeing all the cool moves from the show come out on screen. The soundtrack is actually decent in my opinion considering the hardware, and you can tell the sprite guys had a field day with some of these backgrounds and animations. Again, For those who don't know One Piece, the main character's body is made of rubber, and that means that he can sort of do a lot of really cool, weird, stretchy things to beat up his enemies. And it's really neat to actually see that fleshed out through gameplay. With that said, a lot of enemies are just reskins of other enemies, and combat does get a bit repetitive. While this game doesn't really have the chance to tell all the intricacies of the East Blue arc, it does showcase some of the coolest moments from early One Piece in a little package that you could probably get through in half a Saturday afternoon. Is it a great game? Nah, not really. But I think it's a fun game for any fan of the series. So why didn't this come out in Japan? Well, my guess is that in 2005 when this game came out, the Japanese were all the way over here in the Water 7 arc by the time of its release, and the East Blue arc that the game covers probably felt like old news to readers of the manga and watchers of the anime. It also could have been a situation where the game was specifically meant to go alongside the 4Kids animation, as a certain character's quote-unquote lollipop, rather than their cigarette in the original, can be found as a collectible in the game. Considering a lot of other anime games on the GBA were shovelware at best, you could do a lot worse than One Piece.
Whew, that was weird. Way to hijack my video, man. Not cool. Anyway, with the time I saved not really having to talk about One Piece, I finally did find it. The secret sauce. Exactly why no one talks about these games, really. And why even I had a bit of trouble finding talking points in preparing for this video. These games are all shit. There it is. That's the issue. They're all mediocre games. Not a single one of these titles, with the exception of Twisted Metal purely for brand recognition, or One Piece for being a Frankenstein's monster of different games artwork and assets, is notable for anything beyond its mediocrity. The Nancy Drew games were released too often to have any notable innovation across all its entries. Sonic GBA is a dumpster fire, barely worth acknowledging besides to say how poorly it represents the original. Dragon Ball GT Transformation was a rushed, ugly dumpster fire itself, trying to cash in on a mediocre series that had already ended by this point. Even in series that are considered fun or enjoyable, these titles fail to match the charm or exciting gameplay that other aspects of their series they represent. The fact of the matter is, no matter how popular a series is in other parts of the world, if we can't even find it acceptable, what's the point in paying piles of cash to pump it out on some other schmuck in Mother Russia or something to find and hate? And this is just the top of the iceberg. Babies, Kids, Barbie licensed games, generic football titles, Custer's Revenge, Aquaman, Battle for Atlantis. All these games are stuck over here for a reason. No one wants to play this crap. That's why no one talks about it. I'm sure if I even messaged a European and asked what they thought of Food Network Cook or Be Cooked for the Wii, I'd probably be told to kindly go fuck myself. Because it isn't a real game, but it is. But there's one that stands above all the rest. A king who sits upon his shitty throne. And all other bad NTSC games strive to so much as hope of living up to the utter ineptitude and utter failure of. But that, my friends, is for another time. Thank you.